All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. The first section is just mostly logistics, so that'll be okay if other folks are coming in during that. Want to welcome you to our webinar today, Digital Literacy and Technology Integration in Adult Basic Skills Education. And Jen and Kathy have a great webinar for you today. I think you're really going to enjoy it. A little bit about what will happen today. We are recording, so we'll send out a follow-up email probably next week. We'll include a link to the webinar recording. The slideshow, Kathy and Jen have agreed to share their slides with everybody. We'll also include a link to the research brief that they're going to be talking about, a transcript of the chat, and a certificate for attending. A little bit about the controls we're going to be using. So we'll use the chat to introduce yourself, which you've already been doing. We'll also use it to share links. So as Kathy and Jen are talking and they mention different links, we'll try to post them in the chat so you can pull them up and have them readily available to you. Also, if you want to ask questions to the presenters or to the group, you can put those in the chat as well. We will have open things up for questions after the end of their presentation. Then we're going to do some breakout rooms and we'll have some sharing at the end as well. If you'd like to ask your question orally or share some thoughts or reflections, we're going to ask that you raise your hand. We'll call on you. You'll unmute yourself, say what you have to say or ask your question, and then mute yourself again. You can raise your hand by looking at that black bar on the bottom of your screen, clicking on reactions, and then there'll be a big raise hand button that you can click on. You can find our upcoming webinars at proliteracy.org/webinars. We have one more webinar next week in this series about learner recruitment. And then we also have a webinar this week, our director's perspective on human resource management. And then we're going to be taking a break during the summer so we can prepare for our conference coming up in the fall in San Antonio. So if you're looking for something to do late September, I would encourage you to check that out. All right, a little bit about the agenda, and then I'm going to turn things over to Alisa. So Alisa is going to talk about the research briefs in general. Jen and Kathy are going to talk about the research brief that they did. We're going to have questions once they're done with their presentation. Then we're going to break out into some small groups of about 8 to 10 people. We're going to ask you to talk about kind of two primary questions. What's something you've tried that's related to this research, and what's something you're interested in trying? Then we'll all come back together and just kind of share final reflections. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Alisa.
Thank you so much, Todd, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much to ProLiteracy for sponsoring these webinars and the research briefs that came before them. So I'm Alisa Belzer. I'm a professor at Rutgers University. And my connection to this is I am the series editor. And so I get the privilege of introducing all the authors that I invited to write the research briefs. Today's presenters and authors of the research brief on integrating technology are Dr. Jen Vanek and Dr. Kathy Harris. Just a brief bio on each of them. Dr. Vanek is the Director of Digital Learning and Research at the EdTEch Center at World Education. She's a researcher, teacher educator, and professional learning facilitator who focuses on digital literacy, online learning, classroom technology integration, and English literacy and language learning. As part of that work, Jen facilitates the IDEAL Consortium, that's IDEAL, a community of practice that supports adult basic education practitioners and administrators to develop quality educational opportunities for adult learners. Jen is currently leading a field test of features of Adobe Reader that make it easier to read digital text. And Dr. Kathy Harris is the director of the Literacy, Language, and Technology Research Group at Portland State University in the Department of Applied Linguistics. Her current work focuses on the importance of digital literacies for adults without strong foundational skills and those whose first language is not English for purposes of health, work, education, and life skills, as well as the ways to integrate those skills into English language instruction. So I welcome both Jen and Kathy and thank them again for presenting today. So Todd, if you could go to the next slide. Just a word about the research briefs. ProLiteracy published 5 research briefs this past year. We were busy during COVID year. On the topics that you see here, each one of these briefs has then or will then have a webinar as follow-up or just really as introduction, I guess I should say, to the research briefs. The purpose of the briefs was to provide the field with a short, very approachable summary of what do we know in these topics, so that when you go to, look for information, this could be a really good first go-to on each of these topics. And do note that we're now in the works to do 2 more, which will come out in the coming year, one on motivation and one on creating inclusive classroom spaces. And so we urge you to take a look at the full research brief, which isn't very long given its name. I think Todd just put the link in the chat, but if you lose the link or you want to find it at some other point, just go to the ProLiteracy webpage, look under resources and publications, and you'll find them. There's the link. So that's the research briefs. And with that, I think you can go to the next slide.
I think actually we're going to stop sharing and let Jen and Kathy share.
Oh, great. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jen and Kathy. So thank you. While they're getting their slides up and ready, I'll just say that if you have questions as they're presenting, please just put them in the chat or jot them down to yourself. As Todd said, we will have a Q&A at the end. I'll be monitoring the chat and keeping my eyes out for specific questions for our presenters. So we will have time to get questions answered. So go ahead, Jen and Kathy.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much for having us here today. We're going to give you a whirlwind and very concise tour of the paper, which of course you can check out on your own to dive more deeply into. We'll talk a little bit first about our work together. Kathy and I have been collaborating for over a decade on different projects. Gonna frame the issue for you. I mean, I guess if you don't understand why this issue is important yet, we'll hope to convince you with a few compelling statistics, and then we'll move into the actual description of the work. So first, one sec, I just want to frame some current research that Kathy and I are working on together. We got a grant about 2.5 years ago from the Walmart Foundation in order to explore the characteristics of 21st century learning ecosystems, specifically with respect to understanding how technologies might be employed or how learners might succeed in employer-supported education opportunities. This is a very exciting work for both of us. It builds on both the prior work at the LLTR that was started with Steve Reeder with a longitudinal study of adult learners, and then with the Learner Web work that came after that, and numerous studies on digital literacy and supports for learners around digital literacy connected with that. So this is just a quick plug to encourage you to check out the website. We have close to 25 blogs that we've been posting as we've had insights into our research, and we would love it if you could tag along with that work. Tangentially related to digital literacy, but certainly an important project, I think, for you to follow along with. So with that, Kathy, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jen. So the imperative, it's like, why is this so important? Well, it's so important because of the fact that 18 million households do not have broadband internet access. They don't have internet access through something that's always on and higher than dial-up. And if you break that apart by level of education, race, or ethnicity, the statistic is even more dire. So that's one of the reasons we feel like this is so important. 32 million adults cannot use a computer effectively. They cannot do the things that they need to be able to do to be successful in their lives and meet their goals. And half of Americans don't have enough comfort and confidence in their technology skills to continue to learn, which means moving forward as technology continues to be part of our lives and it changes and evolves, people don't have the skills to keep up. And so that's why it's so important. That's the sort of framing of the issue as to why Jen and I do the work that we do. All right, so to start with, let's talk about integrating EdTech in the classroom to support digital literacies. So we have to think a little bit, about how to create opportunities for learning. We know that learning opportunities need to be timely, relevant, and connected to learners' lives. Go ahead, Jen. Thank you so much. Jen, thanks for doing the slides. I appreciate it. So technology used in and of itself does not produce better learning outcomes for students. So we need to think about using technology to meet two goals. One is creating digital literacies so that people can, in support of content learning, and another is, in doing that, pushing their development of new literacy skills, new digital literacy skills. And so there's a couple of things that have come up as being really important here. One is to have one-to-one devices. People need a device in their hands at the time that they need it as they're learning. It's not something that you teach someone and then they go off and do later. They need a single device for a single person in their hand at that time. Second, that technology needs to not be used for just drills and practice, but in fact to promote critical thinking and problem solving. So it's not just rote learning. We don't want to use technology just for rote learning. In fact, it's better to use it for problem solving and critical thinking. Another guiding principle here is to use technology on the activities that students are confident about and do more instructor guided instruction for the things that are new or that they're less confident about. So this kind of goes back to the principle of how many new things do you want to be doing at the same time. You don't want to be using a new tool at the same time you're talking about new content, at the same time that you may be using new language. So this idea that we want to use technology on those things learners are confident about. And then we want to make sure that the technology that's being used in pursuit of digital literacy development aligns with the learning objectives, looking for what is it we want to have happen with our learners. So we want to avoid what I call the cool tools problem, and others have called the cool tools problem, this idea that we use a tool because it has a feature we think is cool. Instead, we really need to be driven by what are the learning objectives that we have in our instruction, in our tutoring. So, okay. Thank you, Jen. So one of the things that's really helpful is to consult a framework. And in our research brief, we've talked briefly about 3 different frameworks. It really can help a teacher to think about how to integrate a tool or a technology to support learning. The first one is we call TPAC, the Technological Pedagogical Context Knowledge, which looks at the kinds of knowledge that teachers need to have in order to think about integrating technology in a way that helps learning. The second one is called the SAMR model, which is substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. And that's this idea that the different ways that technology can enhance or transform education, to really be thinking about how is learning either enhanced or transformed. And then the Triple E framework, and these links are all in the research brief. You're welcome to go there to find them. Triple E looks at the degree to which the technology helps students to meet learning goals, and provides a framework for teachers to evaluate tools in light of those goals, of those pedagogical goals. Okay, Jen, go ahead. All right, another thing we need to do is create opportunities to support basic computer skills. And to do that, we need to, first of all, teach relevant vocabulary. Then we need to think about the variety of grouping strategies. Rather than having the teacher, the teacher model and the students do, and that's part of how it works. But the other thing we need to pay attention to is having students work in groups to solve problems with their technology or to do something with technology, and also to work alone. Because what we've seen is that productive struggle is really important in digital literacy acquisition. This idea that people need to make mistakes, they need to discover what they're looking for, because how many times have you logged in and something is completely different now than it was yesterday? And that's part of technology. Technology, as we know, is continuing to change. So it will always continue to change. So part of the mindset, part of actually digital literacy is the expectation that it will change and that one will make mistakes and that one is going to have to discover how to do this thing next. Peer support is also really important. This idea with grouping strategies that people learn and expect that they'll get help from each other, because no one person knows it all when it comes to digital literacy. Knowledge is very much distributed. And so this idea that we help each other in peer support in our classes is really important. Thanks, Jen. All right, so another thing to think about to create learning opportunities is to use what students know. And that doesn't matter what language they know it in, right? So many of our students use text, and they use it in all the different languages that they interact in. Texting has been shown to be really effective, like nudging, where a program or a teacher will send a text to their student, reminding the students of an upcoming assignment or a deadline of some kind, promotes engagement and even attendance. Text can also be a mechanism for delivering micro lessons. This idea that people can have little self-access, on-demand micro learnings that they can do when they're available, when learning is available. So people can be lifelong learners as long as they want, whenever they want. Social media is something a lot of our students use. They use it, and in social media are opportunities for collaboration and peer learning, and even participants, so this is some studies that Jen was involved with, even participants with beginning levels of print literacy could use social media to interact with others, and that foster their critical literacy skills. Some really nice research there about how social media, Susan Gare has also done some really good work on using social media to supplement classroom learning and to promote engagement and collaboration with her students. And because technology is always changing, we need to pay attention and continue to pay attention to what our students know, what they're already expert in. So not everything that we do with them is new. All right, Jen, go ahead. Thank you. Another thing that's really important as we create learning opportunities for students is to make technology relevant for both academic skill development and to do the things that students need to be able to do with their lives. For academic skills, certainly there's lots and lots of technology lots and lots of relevance there, whether it's doing research, it's reading online, making class presentations, critical thinking skills, and so on. But it's also, these skills are needed and need to be relevant to students' lives. So for example, when people need to communicate with their child's teacher, this is a skill they need to have both technologically and linguistically. They need to be able to read the school calendar. They need to be able to search for and apply for jobs, and that information is online, and it takes technology skills. Digital literacies are required for that. And in the context of health, increasingly, and COVID has shown us this just every day, how important digital literacies are for participating in one's healthcare. Everything from filling out medical forms to communicating with providers, and increasingly accessing patient portals. I mean, patient portals are really important for getting test results, high quality health information, making appointments, and so on. So our students need to be able to use technology to both learn the content knowledge that they are learning in your program, but also for the things they need to be able to do in their lives. All right, Jen. All right, people often think that learning digital literacies is a one and done, and that it's a solitary activity between a device and a learner, but it isn't. Human connection is very important, and this often surprises people when we talk about it. But human connection is really important when learning new digital skills, when struggling, as we all do, when something doesn't work, we get stuck, and to find relevance. For people who think that this doesn't matter to me, human connection helps people to see, oh, this does matter to me. Yes, this is relevant to my life, and I do want to learn how to do this. So building opportunities for human connection, and there's lots and lots of ways programs have done that. They do it through tutoring programs, volunteer programs, many-to-one, one-to-one classes, all of these kinds of things. Drop in telephone, and during COVID, we see this happening in telephone helplines and so on. But building opportunities for human connection is really important. And then lastly, providing opportunities to create content is another opportunity, something that's very important when building in opportunities to integrate technology to support digital literacies. And that is, whereas we used to think in the old days, we used to think that using the internet was for very passive things, to find information, to get things. But now what we know is our learners need and want to be able to create content. And that might be making any kind of multimedia. That might be making how-to videos on YouTube, create or post music or music videos, write blogs, and being activists on social media, and so on, right? Our students need to be able to create content. It is an opportunity to share their voice, to have a voice in their world. But also it supports project-based learning. This idea that when you do a project in your classroom, using multimedia tools is it creates similar skills to traditional paper and pencil. And it really, so that's an example of the using technology for two things. One is pushes the content knowledge forward, but also in doing so creates new media skills. So these are some of the things that we need to think about as we create opportunities for learning in our classrooms with technology to push digital literacy forward. All right, now Jen, I think you're going to talk about the next section of our paper.
Yeah, and as I'm transitioning over, I just encourage you to just reflect for a second and throw a question about the instructional oriented content that Kathy just covered. Just start brainstorming so that when we go to breakout sessions, we'll have something to talk about. So all of the instructional brilliance in the world won't do a thing if there isn't programmatic support for integrating technologies and supporting digital literacy development in our classrooms or remote instruction and distance education. So I have 3 or 4 different sort of content areas to talk about here. Areas that we found really salient in the research as we were going through our literature review. The first area is around partnerships. Partnerships play a critical role in supporting technology integration because they help education providers leverage resources from organizations that have sort of a like mission or might support the same types of learners. Partnerships can make certain that learners have access to digital learning opportunities beyond what happens in a formal education. So for example, there might be a drop-in digital literacy support service available at a community-based organization that might do workforce development, or like as Kathy has seen in her research, either in public housing sites or in healthcare providers. So using digital literacy resources, these programs can take resources created by ABE providers, so there's a benefit to them too, to help learners navigate their websites and access the services that they're providing. One limitation of partnerships is that they often start, according to what we read, they often start with a grant, with a short-term goal. So if it is to sustain and endure beyond that discrete project, you need to start embedding sustainability strategies right from the very beginning. I'd like to elevate one example of a partnership that we found that many of you might know about. The English Plus integration initiative created by the Migration Policy Institute's National Center on Immigration Integration Policy aims to connect community-based organizations with education providers, public health officials, early childhood education services, and social service providers. So stakeholders from all of these organizations might come together in order to identify their shared pool of participants, and the CBOs can leverage the expertise of the English language instructors, and they can also leverage the expertise in the digital literacy area to make sure that as immigrants and refugees are settling into new communities, they have comprehensive integration support that helps them with education, digital access, and language education. This program was started before the pandemic, and one promising implementation model of this is the Lifting Immigrant Family Trajectories. It's an initiative it's in Denver, I believe, centers around a series of workshops on integration topics that are interwoven with digital literacy supports and English language lessons. So they get, through joint planning, the learners are getting everything they need through visiting this one organization and through this tight partnership across the different providers. So I hope you'll check out the paper to read a little bit more about that. You can also go to the Migration Policy Institute website, which I've linked to here, to read one of the initial reports that MPI published on this really innovative and useful model. The next thing I want to touch on briefly is just the impact of professional learning. Effective professional development is super important in this area, particularly because, as Kathy noted just a few minutes ago, technology is constantly changing. Like, you might log into a website one day and see something completely different from the next. So PD needs to be ongoing. Teachers need to be taught how to do problem solving and to have some digital fluency, and to be able to apply learnings across different contexts when they're learning. In order to make this happen, PD needs to be really relevant and aligned with program goals so that we're learning more from a thematic or context-based perspective rather than like focusing on discrete and siloed skills. PD also needs to align with a lot of the stuff that we know from the good work of Linda Darling-Hammond. Effective PD has a focus on content, provides active learning experiences, is aligned with teacher beliefs and program goals, sustained over time, has ample opportunities for collaboration, and as Darling-Hammond points out, also we need to have, after PD is over, have ample ongoing technical support available. An example of this that I would like to share is a course actually authored by us at the EdTEch Center at World Ed. After we turned in the draft, but it's such a good example, I wanted to share it here as a concrete example. The Transforming Distance Education course was funded by Octave. We created it last summer, and it is a series of modules that covers topics that represent the range of considerations you might need in order to create or beef up or scale up a distance education program. They're online on the website. The link just got chatted, and teachers can engage with these independently. They're interactive self-paced modules. But what we have noticed is at least 4 states and several large community-based organizations have asked for copies. This is Creative Commons license, it's open access. They've taken them and put them in their own learning management systems, and they're creating professional learning communities for teachers to come together to make use of these media and then discuss what's going on and apply the learning into their own instruction. So just by doing that, we've got focus on, we've got active learning experiences because they're transferring what's happening into their work. It's sustained, the PLCs meet together over time, there's collaboration. So I guess the point is you can take almost any online interactive learning object and turn it into an extended and rich learning experience for teachers by embedding this into a professional learning community. And then the final area I would like to touch on is on access. I think this is perhaps one of the most important considerations when you're thinking about technology integration and digital literacy development. From an equity perspective, you can't do anything if teachers and learners alike lack access. So access to digital tools and activities shouldn't just be thought of like for one level of education or one group of students, but rather should be understood as like being integral to programming like all adults' needs across any program that is going to be relying on technology. Also, you know, there's been research that shows that actually having this access does, when it's coupled with support, when it's not just access alone, but when it's coupled with support, can lead to not only people learning things, but increased empowerment and agency and civic participation that learners can then use to leverage and make their own choices about learning in the future. An example of this are these digital navigator programs that you might have heard about popping up across the country. Many programs leveraging CARES Act funding have been able to partner with county and community-based organization, maybe community college partners, in order to create lending programs that are paired with digital skills support and technology or technical assistance. These places tend to be located in places that are convenient for learners, which is right now online, but conceived to be happening in libraries, one-stops, American Job Centers. There are even some nascent examples of this happening in boxing gyms or in cafes where there's somebody there that can provide access to a device but most critically give support for digital skills instruction and making use of that device. So if you would like to see what needs to go into creating one of these programs, I encourage you to check out the link that just got chatted. The EdTech Center has created a resource website for programs that are interested in setting up their own digital navigator programs. So I encourage you to check that out as well. Okay, so we actually made it in the allotted time, I think. Are there any quick questions that we should resolve before we go into breakout groups? I'm not
You
seeing.
you can unmute yourself or type it into the chat. I have one question for you guys. Given the pandemic and the fact that most programs were using remote learning anyway, how is what you're talking about either different or additive to what programs probably mostly have been doing for the last year?
So since you said program, I can start at the programmatic level, and then Kathy, if you want to dive into the instructional level. Well, I think that I'm not sure that if what we would have written would have changed entirely. Like a lot of the foundational research and the ideas probably would have stayed the same as the examples that are changed. So that's why actually I had a hard time ignoring what I know now and not including new examples, stuff that has emerged since the pandemic. I think what's happening is the field is becoming more equitable in terms of access to devices and quality remote and online instruction because of the necessity. I think there were pockets of quality and excellence that we were all really looking hard to find, but what's happening now is that they're everywhere. So I'm hoping this is like a downstream, there's momentum that's going to continue the field sort of marching forward there. Kathy, you want to add anything?
Some of what I've seen is how people who before were dabbling on integrating digital literacy into their classrooms are now doing it fully and and having to push the instructors push their own learning forward in ways they hadn't thought about before, and providing a lot more and learning that they can provide support themselves to their learners, and doing whatever it takes, the multimodalities that it takes to get learners, especially very low-level learners, to engage. They've slowed down, they're doing less, but they're supporting it more. Even if that means you call up a learner and you do something over the telephone. So I have seen people get really creative, but I think Jen's right. The basic things we've learned haven't changed, but people have had to teachers have had to be more of their own support, and they've also had to expand the ways that they support learners.
Yeah. I see there's a question from David.
Can I just follow up real quickly?
Yeah.
Just having, because I'm interviewing teachers now about, where they are a year later, I think it's also really important to distinguish between we're using technology for everything we do, distinguish that from we're teaching digital literacy, because I think that using technology in the classroom just to sort of get material across is not necessarily the same as promoting digital literacy. So I wondered if you want to comment on that really quickly, and then we'll take David's question.
I think that's a really good point to make. And I think one of the things that we did find in the research we reviewed for this research brief is using technology in and of itself doesn't push learning forward. It doesn't create greater learning outcomes. You've got to be able to use learning for the content, use the technology for the content learning, as well as develop the skills and push the skills forward, right? To do that. So, and I think, Alisa, that's a really good point, is during COVID, we've used technology as a way to get stuff to people, not necessarily instructionally. But I think by doing that, I think it's developed a lot of teachers' confidence. That might really help. That might make a big difference. And it's developed learners' confidence too, I think, for when we do kind of move past emergencies into day-to-day instruction.
So we have actually, I'll just add to that. So Lisa and I are sort of on a parallel project with eBase here where we're interviewing teachers. And at the EdTEch Center, we have been interviewing remote teachers that have been engaged in remote ESOL instruction. And I was most recently on the phone with teachers from Carlos Rosario International Public Charter School who actually have been doing a pre and post digital literacy assessment with their learners who were engaged in remote ESOL instruction, and their skills actually did increase, at least on that assessment. The other thing I want to say in terms of supports is that that's only possible if there are the supports. Like, they're not just going to figure it out necessarily on their own because they have to. In fact, the surest way to deprive a learner of agency and learning is to throw an unaccomplishable task in front of them. So pushing digital literacy skills while you're doing language instruction or other academic content areas is only good if you've got the adequate support to make sure they can succeed. And then David,
go ahead, Jen.
David's question here. So It's interesting in my writing lately, I have been trying to not just use the word technology. I've been saying integrating digital technologies. A pencil is a technology. Okay, so the novelty of a technology shifts as it becomes more popularized. Okay, so now when we're talking about technology, I'm really thinking about digital technologies, and I'm imagining a day where, you know, a mobile device is the same thing as a pencil in a classroom. I don't know. That may or may not happen, but I don't think we're like in a post-technology recognition phase or era yet. I think it's still important to be explicit when we're talking about the skills needed to use these digital technologies. And so for that reason, I think we do still need to talk about conscious integration of the technologies into the teaching and learning that happens. Kathy, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks, David. That's a great question. Because I've resisted kind of conflating technology integration with digital literacies because I think those are related but different things. And but one of the things that let's see if did I forget my point? Oh, I might have forgotten my point. I forgot. Hopefully it'll come back to me. Gosh, it just went away.
Well, while you're thinking of it, Kathy, can you just say a little bit more about the difference between digital literacy and integrating technology? Because you said, I think they're two different things.
Yes, and I also remembered what I was going to say. So let me just finish what I was going to say, because I think it relates, Alisa, to your question. And that is that I think when we talk about integrating technology, it's using technology to do the different kind of things that we need to do. And that's everything from knowing how to, from a teacher's point of view, to thinking a little bit about what is technology and how does it come into my classroom. And I think that if we don't stop and think carefully about it, can really lead us to the cool tools, what I call the cool tools program. I didn't invent that, but the cool tools problem, where people will take a technology or a tool and say, all right, how do we use this to push our learning forward? Instead of, my students need to know how to do X, Y, and Z in their lives and for their academic skill, their academic career, right? So what is the best way for them to acquire those things and those skills? And the digital literacies are the things they need to be able to do to accomplish those goals. Whereas I think if we talk about just technology integration, it tends to focus more on the things. So they're certainly related, but technology integration doesn't really talk about skills. It doesn't talk about what are the things that people need to be able to do. So I think Jen, I think you make a really good point. We still need to have both. We need to think about both of those things still. Even digital technologies. I
think of it as just like another material that's required to accomplish an activity or implement some sort of pedagogy. It's, you need a PDF, or you might need a book, or you might need this worksheet, but in like the technology resources or the devices themselves could be kind of classified as, those types of media or equipment.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. We have one more question, and then if nothing else pops up, we're going to go into small discussion groups for several minutes. So the next question comes from Barbara. Can you speak to integrating synchronous, asynchronous, and live digital technologies in teaching and learning?
Oh, just a tiny little question.
Well, those are all modalities of instruction that are happening now. I'm not sure where to go with this question. Can you speak?
Where I would go with this is that I think that where we are today in many of these things is to think about the learners and our learners' goals and our curricular goals, and what is the right combination of things that meet those goals. And some of it might be synchronous, some of it might be synchronous, some of it might be face-to-face or live, right? But I think we have to think of making a cake. What are the different ingredients that meet the needs of this group of people and the goals that we all have together? So I think we have to think of the mixing and matching, because we now have all these great things that are possible, and what works for whom at what time.
I agree. I'm running a study group right now with a bunch of teachers in Arizona who are piloting the HighFlex model, which blends asynchronous, in-person and live remote instruction, and in equitable ways so that learners can participate in any way. And you're absolutely right, Kathy. They're actually finding that the schools themselves don't necessarily have the technologies available to them to provide an equitable learning experience across those different modalities. So they are busy trying to gain cameras and mic systems that create really wonderful learning opportunities for learners, whether they're in the classroom or they're sitting at home in front of their computers. Yeah, so yeah, again, it's just like matching, like as Kathy said, matching the modality with technology that's required to support it.
Okay, thank you so much. So at this point, we're going to break into small groups. I know the temptation is great to break away at this point, but I encourage you to stay because I think the opportunity to talk with other practitioners about what you've just heard in terms of your own practice, either what you're already doing that fits with this and sort of checking in with other people about how do you do this, how do you do that, and also thinking about what's something new you want to try as a result of what you heard today, or what's something new you want to look into, at least as a next step. And I think there's two reasons to do this in community. One is I just think that saying out loud to other people something you want to try makes it more likely that you actually will, instead of just going back to your regular life at 3 o'clock. But I also think hearing from other people can stimulate you to think about things either you didn't quite pick up in the presentation or you hadn't thought of, or hey, if someone else is trying this, maybe we could. So we're gonna randomly place you into groups. We're gonna give you about, let's say 13 minutes. According to my computer, it's 2:42. So we will come back at that point, and that'll just be an opportunity for people to kind of share something that's on their mind as a result of the discussion. And then we'll end at 3 o'clock, but our presenters will hang around sort of like in the hallway after a presentation if you want to speak to them in a little bit more intimate setting. So with that, I'm gonna have Todd do his magic, put you all in rooms, really addressing those two questions. What's something you're already doing that resonates with what you heard today? What's something you wanna try? And I'm going to strongly encourage that someone in the group take the role of saying, let's each go for about 2 minutes, or let's make sure everyone gets a couple of minutes to talk, and moving on and giving everyone an opportunity. So with that, I'm going to bid you adieu for about 12 minutes, 12, 13 minutes. Go ahead, Todd.
No, and everybody, you will automatically go to a breakout room, and when time is up, you will automatically come back here. So we'll see you in 13 minutes.
Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. We are, we've lost, a lot of people have left us, but it's kind of nice in the last few minutes in a more intimate crowd to hear from you all. And this is an opportunity to just say one thing that's on your mind that was new to you, or that you want to try, or that really stood out for you, either from your discussion or the presentation. You can just unmute yourself if you'd like to speak.
I really like, I spoke to Gwen, and she's in North Carolina, and I really like it that her school, they bumped up the Wi-Fi on the side of the office so students have a place to go to do their work online. You know, that's really a wonderful thing. I'm gonna talk to my administrator about that.
That's great, thank you. Someone else want to go? Something new that stood out for you? Go ahead,
well,
Kathy.
not so much new, but during an in-service, we were trained in blended learning. So the people in our adult basic education for college and career program, we have done a lot of things in terms of blended learning and asynchronous instruction. Although as a math teacher, I prefer synchronous instruction because I like the immediate feedback that I can give the students. But what I'd really like to learn more about is the high flex model, which we're piloting. But the frustration for me is it's only in 3 classrooms, and so I mean there's just so much that you can do with that. I mean, with our budget, there's no way that we can provide that for everybody in the program.
Yeah, that's a fairly resource-intensive strategy, but it does raise, it does create equity issues for people who can't actually come or found it much easier to participate online than to actually get there in person. Again, the person I was just interviewing this morning said that their students are so liking being able to come online that she's afraid that they actually won't come
I
back.
may never show up again.
Yeah, that's actually my issue a little bit. At the beginning of the year or the pandemic, it was a challenge technically and all that. Now that my students are so familiar with it and they don't want to go back to in person, it's so convenient. And
Yeah.
I'm a little bit concerned having that mixed model, some online, some in person, because, you can't really create that community with the ones that would be online if I'm there with the ones in person. But
I think
anyway,
the challenge is to learn how to do that.
Can I
Yeah.
speak to that really quickly?
Yes, please.
yeah,
So
yeah.
in our study group, what we're noticing is that the students that are so excited about sticking to the remote part of the high flex model are those that persisted through the pandemic because they didn't want to come to the program anyway. So what we're looking forward to understanding better in the fall when new students come is if those new students were the ones that stopped out because they didn't want to learn online. So what we're noticing now might just be because of the time we're in. And the students you have right now are the ones that want to be online. So those are the ones that are going to not come in if they have a choice, but that's not everybody.
No, it certainly isn't. And there are some students, I mean, I did get some emails before sessions started in March, the end of March last year, that told me I'm very uncomfortable, working online, and I'll wait it out until, you return face to face. I mean, there are students that they don't like working online.
So I hope everyone saw Jen's chat that they'll be presenting on a high flex model at, when you say Arizona September conference, you mean the Pro Literacy Conference, right? Yes?
No. I'm actually talking about Arizona State Conference, but let's just call that the test run of the first iteration of that work. And as their pilots mature, I would love to, be able to have a broader audience for that.
Right.
If they're willing.
And also note that David Rosen said in the next issue, there'll be a column in the next Pro Literacy Journal, the Adult Literacy Education Journal, there'll be a column on flex models. At this point, we're at the hour. Barbara's asking for more information on the Arizona State Conference. I'm afraid I have to leave, so I will say thank you all for coming. If you want to stay for a few minutes, Jen and Kathy will stay on, and I'll leave it to Jen and Kathy to answer the question about the Arizona State Conference. Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Is Barbara still here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, Barbara, I'd have to Google that myself. I don't have the link.
I'm going to Google it if people want to ask questions, and I'll see if I can find it.
It's their state conference, and it is virtual. So I'm sure.
Okay. Oh, good. I don't have to drive very far.
Yeah. Are you in Arizona?
I'm in California.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? I've got like 7 more minutes I can hang here.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I was going to add that in Springfield, Missouri, one of our centers does have a daycare, a free daycare for, in the same building. It's only certain mornings a week, but the mothers or fathers can come during that time with their children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a lure for sure, a way to get people supported so they can come in.
Right.
And Jen, I just wanted to thank you for bringing that point, because I didn't even think about the students that might have wanted to come to the program, but because of it was online that they didn't come. So yeah, that gives me some hope. Thank you.
It's so interesting. Well, it's so interesting. I mean, David Rosen was talking about courage and risks in our small group, and as educators, you are all taking risks and have to have courage as you're pushing into these new instructional models and using new technologies. So everybody here is a rock star. You're all working so hard.
Yeah, and then coordinating those is really tough. I mean, I love just showing up to the classroom, prepared with all my Xeroxed, the work that we were going to do in the class, and but now, it forced me into, embracing the digital technology, and I'm really glad that it did, because it opened up so many possibilities for us. I have a question for you about the HighFlex and the BlendFlex models. Can you tell us just a little bit more about what that is, and
What I'm going to do is chat a link to a book, and it's an easy to read short book.
Okay.
And the reason I'm going to do that is this is new to me. But essentially, you're creating an opportunity for learners to engage with instructional content in the modality that suits them at any given moment. So they could show up to class, they could tune in by camera, or they could learn asynchronously, like they could engage with the content online through a learning management system. Brian Beatty at San Francisco State University has done like the seminal research and writing on this topic. And I just chatted the link to an open access textbook that is really cool, because the last chapter is a bunch of case studies that people are writing about their HighFlex implementation. So you can actually read what practitioners are saying. Most of this is higher ed. There are a couple of community and technical college programs that have case studies in there. But I encourage you to check it out. The key here is that you need to provide equitable learning experiences. So it's designing for a new way of teaching and learning. I think that the learning curve is quite steep, probably at the very beginning, but I think that it's probably worth it if our goal is to support persistence for learners who can't commit to coming in all the time.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks for this conference today. I'm glad I slipped in to see it. And it was, just really good information. Thank you.
Jen, would that be the IDEA conference, September 13th through 15th?
No, it's their actual state Department of Ed conference.
All right. I'm not having a lot of luck.
It might not be posted yet. It's so early.
It may not be.
Yeah. Well, I need to sneak off. I have a meeting starting shortly. So I'll sneak off, Kathy.
Okay, I'll answer questions if there are any.
Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, Jen.
Bye, Jen.
Bye, Jen.
Well, if I could just say one thing. A year ago, I met Jen because I started writing on the Links website about my developing a way to teach learners who only had a phone, who didn't have a computer. From March 13th to March 15th, I figured out how to teach them using WhatsApp. And I initially said to Jen that none of my students ever wanted to learn anything digital. But I found that once my students had to learn, because we had a very supportive program that put in place computer instruction an hour a day, 5 days a week. And then I was teaching them 20 hours. By the time we had to do the lockdown the second time, they were so happy to go to Google Meets with me every day. They didn't lose a minute. I didn't lose one student. And we all learned a tremendous amount in the last several months. I never thought that I would be here.
Good for you, right? That's great. I mean, the stories that we hear from the cool things people are doing, that they've been resourceful, helping their students to figure stuff out as the need came up, meeting the students where they were. But, as Jen said, we mustn't forget there were students, and there's a lot of them who just didn't come, right? Some estimates say up to 50%, depending on the kind of program. But what a wonderful story, Nan, about how to do that, how to just sort of get through it. I mean, our research has shown it's relevance. It's people seeing, I don't want digital technologies, but then when they say, oh, look what I can do, they're like, oh, and then, oh, this is important to me. This is something of interest to me. This is something that's useful to me.
When it was necessary, mother is the necessity of invention.
Yeah.
So when it was necessary and we had no choice, that's what we did. And then after we did it because we had to, then we started finding advantages. And now my students, they go into breakout rooms, they do activities together, just like they'd be doing in the classroom. It took us a very long time to get to that place, but they're all excited about coming back in September.
Yeah. I think there's also elements of the other things that Kathy and Jen talked about the problem solving with technology and kind of the social nature of engaging in technology and kind of the necessity of a group of people figuring that out together and then having gone through that experience together. And it forms a bond that kind of leads them to support each other, down the road. I think your experience, I think, is a lot of other programs that we talk to are seeing similar experiences with students that kind of stuck together as a group and figured it out how to do it and are now in a place where they find it really rewarding.
Yeah.
Not only did we build a learning community, but when they were in breakout rooms, they were allowed to speak their native languages in order to teach each other, share their screens with each other, learn and develop from each other. And of course, that's the real excitement. That's like John Dewey. That's like learning like together in a normal way, in a collectivist culture kind of way, learning from your peers and having a real reason to do it. So, that was just so exciting.
That's great. It's so exciting.
Yeah, I did that early on. I was teaching pre-lit, lower level learners, and they came on with their cell phones onto Zoom, and I would, I found that they would show up every time, and they did have incentive because they get money from one of the organizations that support them. But I would just leave Zoom on after the class was over. I'd say, okay, ladies, you can just, I'll leave it on. And when you're done, talking to each other here, that's fine. You just log off when you're ready. And I think that was something that really helped build community with them,
Yeah.
To just let them have the technology to use it the way that they want and not be so in control of it as the teacher.
That's one of the things in digital literacies that we're seeing is with digital literacies, you can't really be the sort of sage on the stage kind of teacher.
Yeah.
You really have to be the guide on the side kind of teacher because of the changing nature and the fact that everybody knows something different and encouraging people to find what's relevant to them, right? And discovery, the fact that the teacher doesn't always know. We don't know, we can't.
Yeah.
So, and that pushes us towards more student-centered learning, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think as a teacher, sometimes it's hard to give that up. You buy into the idea, but for me, I buy into that idea, but can I really practice it? And that's been a big challenge for me that, having to use this technology has helped me with, creating more student-centered work.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, we're entering a really incredible age. I mean, it's a renaissance, in teaching. I think we're seeking out the best ways to use the technology towards education. When you see so many examples in our society where the technology is really used to trash people, and so I feel so fortunate to be an educator at this time.
Yeah.
It's
June,
been
did
a
you
pleasure. Thanks. Huh?
June, I think you were trying to say something.
June.
No, I'm just enjoying listening to this because I try to get people to the resources, where they can set up a Zoom account, and try it. And, I try to get people to move forward and view our webinars, so that they can try it. And I'm actually like a one-on-one tutor, and I suck at technology. I I don't have a cell phone, you know, and she wanted to learn how to text. I'm like, here, I had her grandkids come over and teach us how to text, you know, because I didn't know how to do it, you know, but I knew we could do it. We could figure it out. We just had to figure out, you know, what her goals were and how to do it. So I'm just loving listening to everything you're saying.
And I'm sorry, I have to run. Sorry.
Well, we probably all should, actually.
Yeah.
Thanks you all so much for not
Thank
only
you.
coming to this webinar, but for staying and chatting, because it's great to hear what you all are doing. It's just so encouraging to see what's happening in the field. So thank you all.
Absolutely.
All that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Have
good
a
one.
great rest of the day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.